This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
What I learned is you can be a fighter, and that's great. But a legacy that truly lives on is a legacy of kindness. And I had kind of determined, literally in the moment of her wake and funeral, you know what? I appreciate that I'm a fighter and I can fight. But if I really want to make a difference, it's through kindness.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. Senator Meg Kappel is my guest today to talk about her experience with hospice as a caregiver for her mom and how she's helping to expand access to hospice care in her state. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
This episode of The Heart of Hospice is sponsored by Odonata Care. When caring for a loved one on hospice, support becomes essential. Introducing the Care Plan, a path to comfort for the hospice patient, a supportive guide by experienced hospice nurses Nancy Heyerman and Brenda Kizzire. Nancy and Brenda invite you to experience all that the Care Plan has to offer. Be sure to check out their free library of care videos on thecareplan.net or on YouTube. Purchase your copy of the Care Plan today at thecareplan.net. This episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast is sponsored by the Tree of Life Conference by International Doula Life Movement. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas, November 1st through the 4th. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. Attendees will hear from expert speakers like end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes and Death Deck co-creator Lisa Paul. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details.
So this is a first. I've never had a politician on the podcast. State Senator Meg Cappel is my guest today. She's from the state of Illinois. She represents the 49th Senate District. She started representing her community in December of 2020 after years of working as a special education teacher and an advocate. She is dedicated to fostering inclusive environments for students to learn and thrive. She also served as a union rep for her school's teachers union to support other educators and help them have meaningful careers. Meg Kappel has dedicated her career to giving back to the community that helped shape her into the person she is today. So while she has a great 4-year career history already as a state senator, Meg Kappel's going to be sharing the personal story of her caregiving journey with her mom. Her mother was terminally ill with ovarian cancer and died after receiving hospice care. Meg was her mother's medical power of attorney, and she's going to be talking about how she was an advocate for her mom, not only with the healthcare team, but also with her family, which is really important information if you are a caregiver out there. Senator Kappel is also an advocate for hospice in her home state of Illinois. She has sponsored legislation to expand the number of hospice providers in the state and also to increase the number of beds for hospice patients as well. It's a great story. She allows us to have a really intimate look into her caregiving journey and the time she spent with her mother during her mother's terminal illness. So You might need a little bit of Kleenex. There were some tears on both sides from me and from her as she shares this wonderful story of the caregiving journey she had and her mom's legacy that she is carrying forward. So here's my conversation with Senator Meg Kappel. Senator Kappel, it's so great to have you on the show. Welcome to the Heart of Hospice.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
We are going to be talking about a lot of personal caregiving experience and what your story is with your mom. But I want to ask a question of you that I didn't send to you in advance, just so listeners can get to know you a little bit and I can get to know you. What would you say is one of your superpowers?
So I do think that's kind of quite a question, but I do think one of my superpowers is just people. I think I'm pretty good talking to people. I love hearing people's stories. I love, everyone comes from a different place, So I think that being able to look at people, have empathy, hear their stories, really see them. I don't know. I always say I don't know a lot of things, but I kind of know people. And I don't know if it has to do with me being a special ed teacher and having to learn to differentiate, not just academically, but also personalities with your students and the teachers you're working with. But I don't know. I really love people and I love hearing their stories. And I think that's my superpower is people.
I think that's a wonderful superpower. That is a wonderful superpower. I love it also that you went straight to it, that you didn't have to think and try to figure it out, that you knew. That's awesome.
Well, it's kind of weird that you asked me this because right before I was ready to get ready for this podcast, I thought, I'm not good at a lot of things. Well, of course, people will say, oh, you're good at this, you're good at that. But I was like, I'm really good with people.
Oh, that's funny. You were already thinking about that.
I know that's really weird.
Maybe I sent it to you with my mind.
You did. We're like tracking.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we didn't because my mind's not that sharp.
Yeah, neither is mine. But I guess, there's a lot of things that you have to do with my job as a senator. And
sure.
I just think that all the experiences I've had leading to this point has helped me really and it's about people. It's always about people. That's kind of what I believe in. So I'm not perfect and I do make mistakes and I do hurt people. We never do things perfectly, but I do really love being around people.
Well, I think a lot of this is going to come out when we talk about your story with your mom, all the listening and communicating and advocacy. So share the story about your mom and your journey with her while she was on hospice.
Okay. So basically in January of 2015, I got a call from my mom and dad, and my dad was like, she's going to the ER. Can you meet her there? We met my mom and dad there. My dad ended up not staying because he had his own health problems and things going on. And she had been vomiting like violently for a while. After being there for a while, they did some testing and they did find out that she had cancer. They weren't sure what kind. They had to do some testing, but they kept her there, did some scans, and it turned out to be ovarian cancer. So what ended up happening is when all the diagnosis came by, like she had surgery, they had gotten the fluid out, and she was home now. My family had gotten together. I have two older brothers and a younger sister, and my dad and my mom. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do for care because my dad just wasn't quite able physically. And I think he even struggled like mentally to be able to really help her.
Mm-hmm.
So the family pretty much decided it was going to be me. I was teaching at the time and I was like, well, but I was able to get FMLA, thank God for, FMLA in Illinois. And I was able to care for my mom and take her to her treatments. So, I would say that up until that point, my mom were kind of close, but I wouldn't say that we were very close. But during those treatments, when I would take her, we had a lot of conversations. And so what ended up happening was this process started in January of 2015. And then by July of 2015, she had another scan. It was July or August, or around then, it was like July. And they said, well, we're not seeing any cancer. There's a tiny spot. We're not sure. We'll monitor it. She was able to ring the bell. You know how they ring their bell after their cancer treatments?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she was on her way, and she went home. And this was a difficult time as well, because at the time we were building the house that we're in now. And I have 3 kids and a husband. And part of myself, my daughter, and my son, half of our family was living with my parents. My mom was sick at the time, my mom and dad. And then my husband and my other youngest son were living like over in the same city, but with my in-laws, because we really didn't have a place to stay and we were building a house. And so we went from like selling the house. My mom was going through hospice, and I started my master's degree.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, trust me, I went on anxiety meds after this. No lie.
Wow. No stress there.
It was so stressful. But yeah, so we ended up, we were home for the summer. She was doing great. School had started. It was like mid-September. And my mom started getting up and vomiting again and having symptoms again. We took her back. And sure enough, the cancer had returned. And it had returned just within those short months with a vengeance. In fact, I want to say her doctor used the term, it's monstrous.
Oh.
So she couldn't eat. It had pretty much ravaged her internal, like everything on the inside. There was a lot of fluid, her internal organs. And so after some minor surgeries, the doctor recommended hospice. And I remember that very vividly.
Can you describe that day?
Yes, I can describe that because I feel like it was yesterday. My aunt was with me. I remember that too. And the doctor came in and recommended it to my mom, and I was next to her. And my mom was like, okay. And I started tearing up because I think when we hear hospice, we know like it's the end. And it's not always. And I know that, like, because the doctor was able to say to my mom, some people go to hospice and they live a long time and they end up coming out. And
Sure.
sometimes, so I knew that, but I think just that instinct, that gut instinct, I was like, oh no. So my mom's like, okay, we'll do hospice. And the doctor leaves. And I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, is this really what you want? Like, is this really, I'm like, it's hospice. And she said, yeah, this is what I want. She goes, like the doctor said, maybe I'll get better and I'll get out of it, but she goes, maybe I won't. And I was like, but Mom, and I started tearing up. She goes, you know what, Meg? She goes, I'm a realist. And I said, you are. And then she looks back at me and she goes, and I know you are too. And I was like, I am. So right then and there, I knew like, this is what she wants. I am a realist too. My mom's a realist. My mom is really understanding where we're at, probably more than me at the time, really, than any of us. Because I think families tend to go through almost like a sense of denial. Like looking back on that, I realized there were signs. I didn't see it.
Right. We don't want to see that stuff. It's too much.
I think you're right. We have such hope. You hear stories of people recovering, and I had such hope that she would be able to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think she was tired. I think she was tired, and she was older and she had MS and she was tired. So she chose home hospice because she wanted to go home. So that's where we ended up. The next part of our journey was going home and having hospice at home.
So your aunt that was with you guys when the doctor brought up going to hospice care, that was your mother's sister?
Yes. So my mom was the oldest sister. There were 7. There was an older brother. He had passed away. But my mom was kind of like the second mother of her family because my grandmother, her mother, had a lot of health problems. And so my mom would stay home from school and take care of the kids. And, they joke that when it was Christmas time, my mom would buy all her younger siblings socks and underwear. Like
she was like the mom. Yeah.
She was the mom. So we were all up there helping. Like if I couldn't get up there, I was there with my mom a great deal. But sometimes my sister would come up or my aunt would come up, and that proved to be helpful when we had another situation come up. So
Yeah. A caregiving village. Yeah, a caregiving village is a huge thing.
yeah, and I think it was helpful because she witnessed the conversation I had with my mom when it came to going into hospice and knowing what her wishes were. Because I think there was a part of that journey, I was like second guessing on some things. So that was helpful.
But your aunt was there and heard it straight from your mom about what she wanted.
Right. Because we had a situation right before she was getting ready to leave to go into hospice where another family member, out of the goodness of their heart, tried to convince her to stay in the hospital and to receive intravenous like nutrition, which would have made her sick and vomit and throw up, and her body just wasn't capable of even taking care of doing that. And the one time I leave, she came in and convinced my mom of that. And then the doctor, was like, Meg, what's going on? Like, she's like, she will be right back here in the same situation, suffering. She's like, this isn't good. So I had to go back and have that conversation with my mom again and just be like, Mom, like, this is what you said. This is what would happen if we did this other option. And then she was like, you're right. And I turned to my aunt a little bit later. I said, you were there, right? Like, Mom said she wanted to go into hospice.
Yeah, I'm not imagining this.
Yes. And see, there's parts of this whole journey where I am like, I can't remember, but there are certain parts I remember almost like it happened yesterday. And this was one of them. And my aunt was like, no, Meg, I was there and I heard her say it and this is what she wanted. So you're doing the right thing. And I was like, just that reassurance was just so helpful for me because it's a big deal when you're in charge of someone's care and then their end of life care. That could be even because you almost feel like their life is the end of the quality, right?
It is. So Meg, did you feel like maybe somehow not that you had imagined what your mother said, but that you were influencing her decisions or you were overriding what she wanted, that somehow it had become your decision and it wasn't really hers and you wanted to make sure, yes, this is Mom's decision. She used her voice and told me exactly what she wanted.
Yeah, I'm a middle child and sometimes I always tend to like second guess and
Sure.
be like, I thought I remembered it this way. But maybe I've been gaslighted a lot my whole life. I don't know.
But I think caregivers do that. They second guess themselves because they're just trying to do the right thing. And it's like, are you sure this is what you wanted? Now tell me again, this is really what you wanted. And you keep touching back to make sure. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's great. And it shows that the patient truly is at the center of the care.
Well, I agree with that. And that was my main concern, was that I was there for her. I was there to make sure her wishes were carried out. And, I'm an advocate by nature and, being a special ed teacher and just some other things that I've been in throughout my life, I was there for her and I was going to make sure she was going to get the best care and that her decisions and her wishes were followed out. And there was like, nothing was going to stop me. And that kind of determination actually played a role through the rest of her care because, like I said, a lot of people come in with some good intentions.
Yeah.
They mean well, but
they do. They do. But these, I don't know what I've heard them called, like satellite caregivers. They just sort of come out of the woodwork when there's a crisis and I always try to assume positive intent, that they have the best intentions for the person at heart. But when you come in and you're uninformed and you are uninvolved, then maybe that's not your role.
Right. And I also feel, so when we had gotten her home, that's when we started calling her siblings. She has a big family. We started calling all of her siblings. And, that the house that I think a lot of former dynamics of how things were when we were children with the dynamic of the family was trying to come into play. And I was like, no, I'm in charge.
So basically what you're saying is that your aunts and uncles relegated you to you're the little kid again.
I think not consciously and not always in those situations. I think they were very respectful, but there were situations where it's like, I'm going to come in and I'm going to help you and I'm going to do this. And don't get me wrong. Like, they were wonderful. And I'm going to tell a story about that in a little bit about what they were able to do. But there was a lot of activity. Everyone was handling this differently. There was a lot of people at my house, and my mom's house. And I don't think my mother would have wanted it any other way. She wanted her family around her.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted people around her. But it wasn't, it could just, it's family, it's
right.
family
So
in
it's
a really
little
difficult
messy.
time.
Yeah.
It was messy. It was a little messy. Like, people were reacting. There was a lot of emotions, and I'd have to try to stay calm. And it was just a lot. And people trying to come in and help, but that's not what the help I needed. But on the flip side of that, I can say all of them were very helpful also in other ways. So
right.
It was challenging, but I did it because like I said, my job was there to be there for my mother, to make sure her wishes were carried out. And, I have a little reputation in my family for being kind of stubborn. And so they all figured it out fairly quickly that, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it the way that my mom and I want to do it. So
that's awesome, though. So let's talk about these discussions. Your mom had end of life wishes that she had identified. Did you guys have discussions about that, where she sat down and said, this is what I'm going to need you to do?
So she started having those discussions prior to even going to the hospital, like maybe 6 months before. She started saying things like, I want this china piece, like this bowl, to go to you. This was given to me by my great aunt. I want your sister to have that. And she started writing things down.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things she also did is she took out extra life insurance so that she could have a nice funeral. And she did it maybe 2 years before, or like she did it well within. This is before any of this came out. So I think she kind of, I don't know, like maybe she knew, maybe she was having symptoms, because ovarian cancer, you don't really have a whole lot of symptoms.
Right, until it becomes pretty advanced.
Well, and that's exactly what happened. And, but I think, I'm going to get a little, maybe I'll get a little super spiritual here, but I think women have that intuition, that like God-given sixth sense to know things. And sometimes I think we all have it a little bit. And I think she just had this intuition that she knew to do that. So we started having those conversations. And then when I would go in with her for her chemo treatments, I mean, I was with her all day.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of great conversations. And I really, thinking back on that, it's a treasure. It was a treasure of moments with her that, I'm so grateful I had. But we talked about it. We talked about what she wanted, and I just knew what she wanted. So, just from those conversations.
But did she delineate? Did she say, Meg, I want to tell you what I want when I'm dying? Was she specific like that? Or did you just kind of let those conversations evolve naturally?
I think they kind of evolved naturally, but when the doctor came in and said, we think hospice is your next option.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we started having those conversations. But we kind of knew from there, but I would ask her, like, she said to me once, I don't want to take all this medicine, Meg. I want my mind to be here when I'm talking with people. So we were giving her morphine, but we weren't giving her as much as they recommended. And then finally, towards like the end, I just was like, give her the morphine. Like, I had to make that decision because she wasn't really talking by that time.
Right. She wasn't going to be alert enough to converse with you anyway.
Yes. And the suffering was really starting to be apparent. And so I remember I did have a conversation with my dad about this. And he goes, Meg, because I was like, I'm going to give her more. And he goes, Meg, give her the morphine. He goes, just give it to her. And I was like, okay. I mean, so yeah, I was in charge of her care, but I did hear from others in the family. And I don't know, like, I don't know how people do it without that reassurance. I had just in those pivotal, I made a lot of decisions for her that nobody questioned, but some in those pivotal moments where I was like, this is what she said she wanted, but I was able to have that reassurance, like, I'm going to change. She said this, but now I think we need to make a different decision. And I think having supportive people around you to be like, I agree with you, Meg, we need to do it this way was helpful.
So the things that you changed, that was based on what was happening with your mom at the time.
Yes.
Right. Because you can't predict all of those circumstances. She says, oh, I never want to use morphine, but then she's struggling to breathe. And she's not going to be able to converse with you, so you use the morphine to ease the symptoms. What kind of things did your mom say were important to her? Obviously, she had belongings that she wanted to share, and she had started that before her diagnosis. But what other kinds of things did your mother tell you were important to her?
Well, I'm actually getting a little teary-eyed as we talk about this, so I apologize. But it was her family, her grandkids. Sorry.
Rule number 1, we never apologize for tears in hospice. Yeah. Okay. This is what we do.
She loved her kids and she loved her grandkids and she loved her granddaughters. And I think she was really sad that she wanted to see her granddaughters get married. I don't even think, she loved her grandsons. There's 14 of them.
Oh, wow.
10 boys and 4 girls. And she was never able to do that. And I think that was sad to her.
Yeah.
And she passed on the sense that it was important to her to do things in a certain way. So like she always bought really nice shower gifts at like a baby shower or a wedding shower. There were certain things in life that were important to her. And I think for me to carry on that legacy, that generosity that she had for those moments, and especially her granddaughters, I've tried to carry that on, and so that was important to her. Her faith was very important to her. She was Catholic. She was Irish Catholic. And even some of my friends that I grew up with had come over to see her before she passed away, which was just a delight. Like, it was just an amazing thing for them to, that she had such a positive influence on the kids that I grew up with, but she said to my friend Terry, who we still good friends with her today, she said, I used to only really care about everything having to do with the church. Oh, my church, this church, the church. She goes, but now I realize it's really just about Jesus. And I know that sounds really but religion was very important to her. But I think towards the end, she was a very spiritual person anyway. But toward the end, it was like, none of this matters. Like, she had a sense to really pass on a certain kind of faith and spirituality to the people around her. And I think that was important to her. I think that's why she wanted to be home, so that she can have these conversations. Like, she told my husband that he reminded her of her dad, which would have been my grandfather, which was like a major compliment. She put her hand on him and she said, you remind me of my dad. And he was like, if you talk to everybody in her family, they would always say that they were the favorite. Like, that's kind of what he did. Like, yeah. I was dad's favorite. No, I was dad's favorite. Like, he made them all feel like they were his favorite. And for her to say that to my husband was like, first of all, it was a blessing. I think it was like, yes, you have my approval and blessing as my daughter's husband and the father of my grandchildren. But it was a major compliment. She was able to share things with people that she had not shared before. And I think that was really her legacy, I think. Other than the little knickknacks and things she wanted to give away, I think it was just her love and kindness that she really wanted to share with people. That was important. That's
an amazing legacy. When you think about things get broken, things get lost. Their origins become cloudy and nobody knows where that special Afghan came from, or, who painted this. We know it was a relative, but we don't know who. But something like that, where she acknowledged people's gifts and reminded them, this is what I see in you. That's the kind of stuff that becomes part of you and it never leaves you.
Yeah. So it's funny you should say that, because I always, growing up, identified with my dad. My dad's an attorney, lawyer. Like, he is a fighter through and through. Like, if you hired him, he would advocate for you and go through a wall for you. Like, that was just how he was.
He's
and
a pit bull.
He was kind of a pit bull. And I identified with that. In fact, I think that's where my advocacy comes from. Like, if I really believe in something, I'm going to fight for it. But I realized after my mom, going through this whole situation with my mom, and even at the wake and the funeral, when people were coming up to me and they were saying, your mom was always so kind to me. A lot of my friends that I grew up with, I couldn't believe what they were telling me. Your mom always talked to me. Your mom was so nice to me. Like, these are things like from when I was a child, like 7, 8 years old, right? Because the area that I grew up in, we kind of all stay in the area. So, but what I learned is, like, you can be a fighter and that's great. But a legacy that truly lives on is a legacy of kindness.
Yeah.
And I had kind of determined, literally in the moment of her wake and funeral, you know what? I appreciate that I'm a fighter and I can fight. But if I really want to make a difference, it's through kindness. So that's kind of been and then here I am in the political world. I don't know how I'm going to I probably don't know if I'll last real long, but that's just kind of where I'm at. Like, that's the legacy, is kindness. It does, so that's kind of what I took away from this whole experience with her. I miss her every day. Like, I feel very honored and privileged to be able to talk about this situation with you and talk about our legacy and how hospice was such a it was a terrible experience that was also a beautiful experience. It's like holding the tension of that, right? So I'm grateful that you're having me on to talk about it. I'm really appreciative.
Well, you're very generous in sharing all of this. And there's room for the beauty and the pain, right? The grief and the gratitude that comes together. Grief and joy can coexist in situations like this. And your advocacy for your mom is amazing. And there are 55 million unpaid family caregivers that are advocating and caring for someone all over the United States. It's a huge job with lousy pay, because there's no pay for it, right? We're unpaid caregivers.
I agree.
The Care Plan by Odonata Care has revolutionized the hospice experience by improving the standard of care. This booklet provides education and support to the patient and the patient's caregiver. The Care Plan provides step-by-step directions for caregiving tasks like cleaning or turning a patient. Hospice agencies utilize the Care Plan to support caregivers and to provide critical information in the moment when it's needed. This helps reduce after-hours calls and gives hospice staff more time for patient care. The Care Plan's simple design empowers caregivers by giving them the tools they need to feel confident caring for their loved one. Odonata founders Nancy Heyerman and Brenda Kizzire also offer a free library of care videos to provide even more support for caregivers. Videos can be found on thecareplan.net or on YouTube. The Care Plan is available in English or Spanish and can be purchased on the Odonata website at thecareplan.net. It's available in paper and digital formats, and bulk purchases are also available for agencies. Purchase your copy of the Care Plan today at thecareplan.net. In a world where compassion and community are needed more than ever, the International Doula Life Movement presents the Tree of Life Conference. Join IDLM November 1st through the 4th in San Antonio, Texas for an extraordinary experience in end-of-life care. The Tree of Life Conference is not just an event, it's a movement towards making a positive impact. Attendees will hear from expert speakers including award-winning end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes, Lisa Paul of the Death Deck, Brenda Kizzire and Nancy Heyerman of Odonata Care, and end-of-life advocate Helen Bauer, host of the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. This event is made possible by the team at International Doula Life Movement, who believes in the power of empathy, education, and making a difference in the world. Don't miss out on this transformative experience. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas from November 1st through the 4th. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details and secure your spot today.
Tell me about a time when you felt challenged or inadequate as your mom's medical power of attorney, as her advocate.
I think the most challenging part, the most inadequate part, is towards the very end, because that kind of getting back to that situation with her medication. And I think also being at home, like hospice would come in like every other day. They were on call 24/7 and they were amazing. But the nurse would come in like every other day, or I don't even remember. Actually, that's a blur, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, towards the end especially. Yeah.
They were there. And like, so she had a tube because she couldn't eat. So she had a tube connected to her stomach where if she had something to drink, like she could have liquids, but we'd have to empty her stomach out of the tube because it couldn't, everything had stopped working. And she lingered for a while towards the very end. And that was hard. And I was like, trying, because she couldn't talk, but trying to figure out like, why won't number one, you're a spiritual person. You've lived an amazing life. You've left a wonderful legacy. What's holding you back from really crossing over, kind of,
Right.
And I actually did figure out what that was. And I'll share what that was. So the day that my mom passed away, it was the day after Thanksgiving. And number one, I was exhausted, and really, this was the last few days were the hardest. So let me just back up a little. We had Thanksgiving and I was so fatigued and so exhausted, and I had the worst migraine, and I tend to get migraines, but this was a bad one because of the emotions of everything that had been going on.
Sure.
And I went to the family Thanksgiving for like an hour and I left because I was like, I can't deal with this. Like we're trying to be happy. We're trying to have fun, but it was like, mom's not here. And we certainly couldn't have it at the house with her where she was at. But so it was at my brother's, but I come home and my uncle was there. Now, remember, my mother was like a mom to her siblings. And my uncle was like, Mike, I'll take care of her. And he stayed up all night with her. And I would get up and I'd be like, are you okay? And he'd be like, Meg, we're fine. And I watched him care for her and give her her medication and talk with her and stay up all night and just be there for her. And it was probably more like, it was almost like a full 24 hours that this happened. And I found out later that he was a really rambunctious kid. Like we would probably consider him having ADD. He's a drummer. Funny story. He's a professional drummer. Mm-hmm. But that he used to get in trouble a lot. And my mom would protect him from getting spanked and stuff and from getting in trouble. I found that out later. So this was really kind of his way to really love her in her end days and actually really love me because I needed help. I was just exhausted and that was really hard. It was really challenging for me because I was supposed to be there. So I get up the next, after Thanksgiving or whatever, and everyone had left because he had been up with her all night and it was just my sister and I with my mom towards the end. And I finally was trying to figure out why is she lingering? Why won't she let go? It's hard to watch. And I realized it was my dad. So I held her hand, my sister and I held her hand and I said, Mom, you don't need to worry about Dad. I will take care of Dad. Dad can live with me if we need to. And Kathy and I, my sister's Kathy, we will take care of him. Literally minutes later, she passed away, holding her hand. So it was like my dad and keeping her, like she was worried about him in his care because he had health problems. He had things as well to deal with. And I was like, talk about feeling the pressure then to take care of him too.
But, oh yeah, you made a promise.
But she wasn't going to go unless she knew, And I feel again very honored that it was me. Like she trusted me to say that to her. She trusted me to be able to know that I would carry out her wishes with my dad too. So it was pretty intense. I have a pretty intense story, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. And what an incredible legacy your mom left you with for you to be able to tell this story, because storytelling is huge, right? We know it is. It becomes part of who we are. And for your mother to trust you like that and put confidence in you like that and like, okay, she's got this. I can do what I need to do.
That's exactly right. And boy, I tell people that story and they're like, wow. But I will say this. I also had to come to terms with like, I couldn't do that forever. I couldn't take. So my dad, after my mom had passed away, he lived with me for 7 years. But, with my job in Springfield, I have to travel because of my job as a senator. It got to the point, and he was kind of declining, that I had to say to my sister, like, hey, you've got to take him because his care isn't what it needs to be. And she actually does home health. So we were like, we either need to put him in some sort of facility or maybe you can take him. And she took him. So he's been living over there. But there's a little guilt. I'm not going to lie. There's a little guilt mixed in with my feelings with that because I was like, I promised my mom that I would.
Yeah.
But I also think she was also a realist, right?
She told you she was.
And so I think she also understood where I was at and, what had to happen. So, but it took me a while to kind of come to a place where I was okay within myself to be able to let him go to my sisters as well. Not that I didn't think she couldn't take care of him. Like she does home health, but it was like, I made this promise. Like I made this.
I have to live up to my end of the bargain, live up to what I told my mom I would do. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think 7 years was pretty good.
Listen, caregiving, short term or long haul. Yeah. You kept your promise. So let me ask you something. Do you ever talk to your mom, Meg?
I do. I feel like, I remember more now a lot of what she said to me. And, I wasn't always that close with her, but it was such a gift to really, really, truly, because mothers and daughters sometimes don't have the best relationship. I mean, sometimes they're really close, but I had a sister, like I didn't really need my mom. Like my sister and I are 15 months apart. So like, I just didn't need that. Right. And again, I kind of identify with my dad a lot growing up as the tough man. I'm tough and, so it was just really a gift, to remember the things that she said to me and to look at her legacy and remember that. And I feel like she's there all the time, encouraging me and telling me how proud she is. And, I'm telling you, not a lot of people get the kind of mother I had. You get older and you talk to people and there's a lot of conditional love. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of this. And granted, I grew up Catholic, so I had a little bit of shame, a little bit of guilt and shame as raised by Irish Catholic parents. But at the same time, there's so much unconditional love from her that even if she wouldn't agree with me on things, I know that her love was, and still to this day, is just never failing. And people will come up to me and be like, I know your mom is so proud of you. Like your mom would have been so proud. So I don't know. It's just like, I miss her like every day. In fact, I found some of her jewelry and I miss her so much. Like 8 years later, I'm starting to wear her jewelry. It's like just such a weird thing. I don't know.
No, I don't think that's weird at all. I think it's a grief connection. A lot of people do that kind of thing. You wear an old jacket, you get a memorial tattoo. It's a way of staying connected. I think those physical connections have a lot of meaning for us. I think they do. And there's nothing weird about that at all. Nothing.
And I think that was why it was important for my mom to be able to say, like, I want everyone to have this. So she had a jewelry box that I got, and in that jewelry box, she had a list of things in her jewelry box that she wanted. And I mean, we weren't wealthy people. I mean, but she had nice things. Like, she made sure to have nice things.
But she wanted people to get those.
She did. And so, like, I got to have all the granddaughters come over and pick like a couple things out of like rings and stuff out of her jewelry box just to have. And that was important to her too. I think she knew, kind of to your point, that kind of connection. Like, I want them to have this for me so that they know how much I love them and that we're always going to be a part of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I know memories have a different sort of staying power. Your mind has a muscle memory for things, experiences that we have. But I know that those tangible objects have a lot of significance for us. My grandmother died over 20 years ago. And when they dismantled her belongings and sorted through everything, she had one of those old, I guess, stainless steel sewing machines. It was an old Singer in a table that would swivel and hang downward. That thing must have weighed 20 pounds. And, it was very old, but I learned to sew on it. And I had a sewing machine as an adult, as a grown married person. And they asked me, my mother and her siblings said, do you want this sewing machine? I'm like, oh, yes. What did I want with a second sewing machine? I wasn't all that great with the first one. And you know what I did? I don't know where it is now. I think I donated it or I gave it to somebody else that needed it. But I kept that sewing machine for as long as I needed to. And when I didn't need it anymore, I found a place for it.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. True.
It just had meaning for me. So I think that's very normal. And I think that's very sweet. It's a wonderful way to remember somebody.
Yeah, I think that was important to her. So I think you're right. And it's weird because when you're going through the time of like, watching, her kind of move into the next stage, and that they're not going to be around, you do think about that. But at the same time, it's such a blur. Like, I almost feel more clear now about my thoughts and my feelings, 8 years later about the whole process. I probably couldn't have done this podcast even 3, 4, 5 years afterwards. I don't know how to explain that. Like, it wouldn't have been so solid in me.
You think the recall would have been different for you?
I think that I'm actually remembering things more now because the shock and the grief and kind of the trauma of all of it is kind of getting sorted out, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm able to kind of look at and think about things with a little bit more of a clearer head and just more of a heart connection. I think sometimes when you're caring for someone, we're all just surviving.
Oh yeah, you're in survival mode for sure.
I think I was in survival mode for many reasons. I mean, there's a lot of upheaval in my own life. I had things going on at my job. I started my master's degree. We were building a house. I was living. I mean, you talk about major life changes happening all at once. It did. So
yeah.
But I rise to the challenge. I guess that's the fighter in me, I guess.
Well, and that's why your mom put her trust in you. She knew you could do it. So I want to talk about this. The fighter in you, as a politician, you are doing some important work in your state of Illinois to improve hospice care that's being provided or being able to be provided out in the communities there. Tell me about the work that you're doing there to improve access to hospice.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about this because it's just so important and it's very meaningful for me because like you were saying with everything that I'd been through with my experiences. So the area that I live in has a hospice community. It used to be called Joliet Hospice. It's in Illinois. It is now Lightways Hospice, which they were the hospice community that we worked with. And they changed it to Lightweights Hospice just because they served more than just the Joliet community, but several communities and counties around. And for Illinois law, what we had was you could only have 20 beds per location. And there's become such a great need as, you know, we have an aging population, and we know that hospice isn't just for older people. Like, we know that
True.
there's young people that have to take it too.
Sadly enough, yes.
Sadly. And however, it tends to kind of lend itself more towards, you know, your aging population.
Right.
And so they're like, we need more beds. So Natalie Manley and I, Representative Manley, who's the representative in the House, and she's also very active in the Joliet area and the Lightweights Hospice community. She started the bill in the House, but it was to increase the beds from 20 to 24. And actually, also for the state of Illinois, it increased the ability for licensed hospices per county from 5 to 16. So it actually increases the capacity in the whole entire state.
That's amazing. So for all my listeners who are not familiar with the sort of the landscape of the hospice industry across the United States, we have areas, especially rural areas, that are very underserved by hospice care. We can't get staff. There are not agencies out there. We don't have physicians who can manage things. We don't have nurse practitioners. And some areas are just really underserved. And there are different laws from state to state about how many hospices you can open and what the criteria is to get them opened. It can be really challenging. Meanwhile, we still have all these folks that need end-of-life care. So
Yes.
to have regulation in your state of Illinois to expand the hospice care that's accessible there is an amazing work. It's a big thing.
It is. And I mean, to your point about staff, I think that needs to staff needs to be kind of the next step in terms of how we now help the capacity build out. Like we've done these things to increase the capacity, but now we need staff. Now, I'm not sure. I think it's everywhere in every state, but I know in Illinois, there's a certain amount of volunteerism that you have to have. You have to have volunteers that come in to a hospice.
Right. That's every state.
Is that every state? Okay.
Yeah, that's a federal reg. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I thought. But like you said, it varies from state to state. So, I mean, I think the reason why Lightweights Hospice has been so successful and they're actually able to build out their capacity is through volunteerism, but also like we live next to the city of Chicago, like we're kind of by there. There's a lot more people to access those jobs. We still have staffing shortages. Don't get me wrong. I think it's everywhere.
Yes.
But to your point about our rural areas in rural Illinois, there are problems across the medical field when it comes to access and quality care. And hospice is one of them. End of life care is one of them.
Unfortunately, that is absolutely true. So congratulations, and thank you for the work that you're doing to expand hospice in your state. It's an amazing work, so valuable and so timely, so needed with the baby boomers aging into this need. We're going to have people to take care of them, and we're going to have agency to send those people out to take care of them.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate that. This has been just such an amazing opportunity to be able to share my story. And, I think because of my experience, this has been such a meaningful piece of legislation for me to be able to carry forth. And I hope to continue that. I mean, it's kind of hard, trying to make changes in healthcare. It can be a challenge, but we're just going to continue the good work.
That's awesome. So, Meg, one last question. What did you find the most meaningful about sharing your mom's journey at the end of her life?
I actually think it's just a way to honor her memory and honor the kind of person that she was. And also to let your listeners or anyone out there know, hospice, I want to kind of reiterate, like, it can be, your loved one is going through almost a terrible situation. Yet hospice and the care and the philosophy behind it is able to take this terrible situation and turn it into something beautiful. And I was able to have that. Now, I don't know if everyone has that type of journey or type of experience,
Right.
but it was hard. It was really hard. It was very difficult, but it was also really good. And you get to see such good in people. You get to see such good in, my mother. I was able to see just her heart for that. And so, I mean, that was the experience for me. And that's what was most meaningful. And that's why I want to continue this, trying to actually share the story and carry her legacy on of kindness.
Yeah. Meg, I would say that you were right. Your mother would be so proud.
Oh, thank you. You're going to make me cry.
Well, thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for being on the show today and so generously sharing your story. I'm so glad to connect with you.
Thank you, Helen. I really appreciate this. This has been such an amazing opportunity. And just reach out if you ever need anything or have any questions or want to know what's going on in hospice in Illinois. I'd love to connect with you again.
Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram and send your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.